Debate on TV where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
to each and every one of you
for helping our great nation
find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
on radio and online.
We're proud to be
the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
On Mark Dolan Tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Hello there, welcome to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry. Tonight, I'm asking the question, over £6 million a day now is what we spend on hotels. And let's be honest, we're on the 4 stars. I wonder how long it's going to be before we make our way to the 5-star hotels. There was a proposal that was made earlier this month to perhaps explore erecting tents instead in London parks rather than hotels. That proposal was immediately dismissed. I'm asking, should it have been? Is that the answer? I want your thoughts on that. And also, facial recognition technology, where do you stand on this? Do you see it as a harmless kind of tool to help fight crime, or do you see it as quite a big breach of your privacy? And let me ask you this, if someone committed an awful crime against you or your family, would you ever have the inclination to meet that person, get to know them, try and understand their motives? Personally, I think no. But Libby Squire's mum, that is a girl that was murdered in my hometown, she is going to be meeting the killer, not for forgiveness necessarily, but to understand some of the goings on. And it got me pondering tonight, where would you stand on that? Could you ever see yourself wanting to meet someone who would hurt you or your loved ones? This whole kind of restorative justice, is it a thing? Should it be? Do you believe in it or not? We'll have all of that to come, but first, let's bring ourselves up to speed with tonight's latest headlines.
Thank you, Michelle. Good evening. I'm Tatiana Sanchez in the GB newsroom. The Northern Ireland Secretary says he'll call a snap election in the country, but hasn't said when. Chris Heaton-Harris said he would give more information next week and would meet with the Stormont parties. There's been no fully functioning devolved government since February. The DUP is blocking the restoration of power sharing in its protest against the Northern Ireland Protocol. Mr Heaton-Harris added he's faced with limited options.
I have limited options ahead of me. I'm under a legal duty to call an election within 12 weeks. I've had lots and lots of talks with all the parties and will continue to do so. And that I hear it when parties say that they really do not want an election at all. But nearly all of them are parties who signed up to the rules, the law that means I need to call an election. So you'll hear more from me on that particular point next week.
Scotland's First Minister will attend the COP27 climate summit as the Prime Minister is facing backlash over his decision not to go. The Scottish Government has confirmed Nicola Sturgeon will be going to the conference in Egypt next month. Meanwhile, Rishi Sunak is coming under widespread criticism. Speaking in South London this morning, he said he'll be instead focusing on domestic issues.
We're an example for others to follow at the pace in which we've reduced climate emissions, how we're going about protecting our environment, and those things are really important to me. It's important to me that as Prime Minister we leave behind an environment that is better for our children and grandchildren. I'm very passionate about that. I'm very personally committed to it, and I just think at the moment it's right that I'm also focusing on the depressing domestic challenges we have with the economy, and I think that's what people watching would reasonably expect me to be doing as well.
Meanwhile, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says not showing up to the climate conference shows a failure in leadership.
Prime Minister should be going to COP. He needs to show leadership. This is a hugely important issue, climate change. It's wound together with the energy crisis, and I think many people would be expecting the Prime Minister of the UK not just to attend COP, but to use it as an opportunity to pull world leaders together to deal with climate and to deal with energy. And if that doesn't happen, it's a failure of leadership.
The husband of the US House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, has been violently assaulted after a break-in at the couple's California home earlier today. A statement from her office says the assailant is in custody and the motivation for the attack is under investigation. Paul Pelosi was taken to hospital and he's expected to make a full recovery. His wife was not in San Francisco at the time. A man has been convicted in Bristol of murdering his former partner who died 21 years after he doused her with petrol and set her on fire. Stephen Craig targeted Jacqueline Kirk in a car park in Weston-super-Mare back in 1998. She suffered burns to 35% of her body. Craig was convicted of grievous bodily harm with intent, but was arrested again later last year following Ms. Kirk's death. During the trial, medical experts explained how Craig's actions 21 years ago had made a more than minimal contribution to her death due to the long-lasting impact of the burns. A woman has been jailed for life with a minimum term of 34 years for killing her friend and decapitating the body. 38-year-old Gemma Mitchell has become the first woman to be sentenced on television in England. The woman was found guilty of murdering Mi Quen Chong at her London home in June last year and then driving her body in a suitcase to Devon. The judge's sentencing was broadcast live from the Old Bailey in London.
There is the chilling aspect of what you did to and with her body after you had killed her. You have shown absolutely no remorse, and it appears that you are in complete denial as to what you did, notwithstanding what, in my judgment, amounted to overwhelming evidence against you.
And the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, has lent a helping hand in putting the hands of Big Ben back to GMT. Sir Lindsay says the clock change will herald a new beginning for the iconic London landmark. It will be the first time Big Ben's put back since the scaffolding came down from the Elizabeth Tower following a 5-year restoration project. Clocks go back by an hour this Sunday. TV, online and DAB+ radio. This is GB News. Now it's back to Dewbs & Co.
Thanks for that. Well, I'm with you right through until 7 o'clock this evening, and keeping me company here in the studio is my panel, the anthropologist Mariana Hotta and the author and academic Frank Furedi. Good evening to both of you. Hello. And you know the drill, don't you, on Dewbs & Co by now. It's not just about us three, it's about you at home as well. I want to know, what is on your mind tonight? What do you think? To the stories that we'll be getting into, you can get hold of me at gbviews at gbnews.uk is my email. Or you can tweet me at GB News. And tonight, just in case you've just tuned in, you're thinking, what's she going to be talking about? Well, I'll tell you. I want to talk to you about migration, the costs that we're spending in hotels and what the other solutions could well be, and facial recognition software. Where do you stand on that? Do you think it's a bit creepy, a bit of an infringement on your privacy? Or do you think, no, if it helps catch criminals, then good? And also, would you ever want to meet somebody who'd committed a crime against you or your loved ones? So that is on the menu for tonight. Let's start though, shall we, by our top story, migration. Now, we spend a small fortune, quite frankly, on hotels in this country to house people that are crossing the channel. It's up to about £7 million a day now, some of which, to be fair, are the people that have fled the Taliban in Afghanistan. But to be honest, £5.6 million a day is the amount of money that's being, well, I was going to say costing you, but it's not costing you, it's costing all of us, quite frankly, to put people up in these hotels. Now, there was a pilot scheme proposed, Frank, and this was proposed about a month or so ago, and it was looking at London parks, and it was exploring whether or not there could be an opportunity, instead of hotels, to place these people in marquees, tents. It was immediately dismissed. Absolutely not, was the response. Do you think it should have been immediately dismissed in that way?
Well, absolutely. The very idea of turning London parks into this tent city for migrants basically sends out a message, which is come to London. It's an invitation for the traffickers to bring more people into this country. And I think that what really kind of concerns me is that it assumes that illegal immigration is a fact of life that we have to live with. And it's a very fatalistic policy that continually looks for these very small, quick fix solutions and ignores the fact that its impact on London would be a very corrosive one, where you basically create a situation where you essentially turn London parks into an Afghanistani or a Lebanese or an African refugee camp, and almost create this kind of circus-like atmosphere, which I think indicates what these policymakers are really all about, where they are very cynical, because although they often talk about, yes, we're going to do something about migration, we're going to do this or we're going to do that, in reality, they have acquiesced to it and are continually putting on this performance where they say, oh, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. But you know, at the end of the day, there will always be far more people coming into this country than they planned. And it's a never-ending process. You cannot stop illegal migration unless you have a commitment to that. That's all there is to it. And at the moment, there is no commitment by either party to actually put that into practice.
See, I'm absolutely astonished that you think tents would be an incentive to come to this country when actually people are finding themselves in 4-star hotels. That's the incentive, surely.
Well, yes and no. The point is that getting into London, I was doing some interviews in Poland a couple of months ago, and I was talking to a group of people that were heading towards Britain, and they were immediately wanting to find out about, social. They were asking, Frank, do you think social security system is better in England or in Sweden? Where do you suggest that? They're quite brazen about it. And when I kind of discussed the issue with them, it was very, very clear that they regard London as this mecca where they could make a good living, where they can have a good life. I can understand, their motives for that. I would be the same if I was in their place. But the point is that when London, the capital of Britain, becomes the center for migration, it doesn't matter whether it's a hotel or tents or whatever, it basically means that people go there, and then every smart illegal immigrant knows that once you're in that tent city, you're going to make your way somewhere else in London.
Well, I'm going to come back to you on that, but I'm also conscious I want to bring Marianne in as well. So where do you stand on this?
I think at the point where we're deciding where people are staying when they've reached London, we've already missed the point. And the point is dealing with the people who are claiming asylum in the first place and dealing with them fairly and in a way that is appropriate to the genuine asylum seekers, of which there are many, don't get me wrong, there are many, but also for all those local councils and boroughs and local residents who are going, we can't cope with this. We cannot be a place where people end up having to sleep on. There's one place that's referenced in one of the news articles in the Times newspaper today, where the inspectorate the inspector from Her Majesty's government came and said, people are sleeping on camping mats for more than a month in a place, in a detention facility where people should be for no more than 24 hours. That's inhumane. There's been outbreaks of diphtheria in some of these places. I mean, it's just unacceptable. Fundamentally, the problem is people are waiting more than a year, on average 480 days for an initial decision. Asylum seekers can't work for 12 months. And so they are reliant on having someone pay for their accommodation. So that's why we've got this massive bill. It's more than £6 million a day.
6.8 a day, to be precise. 6.8 million a day, 1.2 of which goes to people from Afghanistan that have fled the Taliban. And I've got to be honest, I mean, I'm sure many people watching this, we saw those scenes in Afghanistan. I mean, I'm not sure that anyone would begrudge someone genuinely trying to escape that
Wherever they're
regime.
from, there are many people who are rightly claiming asylum, and it is our responsibility as part of a global citizenship.
Yeah, Marianne, there's an awful lot of chances
asylum
now. There is an awful lot of chances. There's an awful lot of economic migrants.
That's why we need a system that can deal fairly with people more efficiently. Greece deals with asylum claims 6 times faster. Now, they don't have
what's
as many
their volume?
asylum. It doesn't matter.
It does.
Whatever volume we have,
how can you say it
still
doesn't
can't.
matter?
Well, because if you've got a massive requirement of a service, you need to fund the service appropriately.
But the trouble is that once asylum seeker becomes a euphemism for an economic migrant.
It's not.
Well, it is in most cases.
Those are separate things.
Well, it should be a separate case, but most people, they know full well that when they're going to arrive, they have a far greater chance of staying here if they claim asylum than if they say that they're here for a job.
But that's partly because the system doesn't work.
Well,
if you dealt with people's claims very quickly and efficiently,
my point is,
then you work out who gets to stay and who has to go home.
My point is, Marianne, is that the distinction between these two categories has become eroded. And as a result of that, it's not surprising that our existing inefficient Home Office is overwhelmed by large numbers of people. And it seems to me the problem lies in the fact that we have this obsession about, we always talk about genuine asylum seekers, as if we assume that that's what most people are. We know that people coming from the Ukraine, they're coming from Afghanistan, are likely to be genuine asylum seekers. But to be honest, when you have the large numbers of people coming from all over the world who are here to get a job, and they claim to be asylum seekers, I think we should be a bit more circumspect and use our nous rather than basically build up all these problems. And the problem is not just the system, the problem is that there is a kind of vacuum here which is being filled by people who are claiming to be asylum seekers.
I just think when you say, Frank, we need to be circumspect, we need to use our nous, that is what needs to be boiled down into a system run by the Home Office that is properly funded and works and delivers value for the taxpayer. Because, Michelle, you're absolutely right. Spending £7 million on housing people in hotels is utterly unacceptable. It's an absolute waste of our money. And it's a waste of all those people's lives who are genuine asylum seekers, who want to be building a life, and they're just in limbo. It's like they're half dead.
Yeah, but you can't have a system, unfortunately, that actually works in the way you kind of would like to see it happen. I would like to see it happen when, in a sense, society is overwhelmed by such large numbers of people and when the policy lacks clarity. So it seems to me that the first step is to decide, what is our genuine, honest policy rather than what we tell the people sort of through PR kind of communications. Once we decided that, we can say, well, we can do what they did in Australia, or we can tighten up this, or we can loosen that. But the problem at the moment is that a policymaker confronted with this large number of individuals coming in claiming asylum has got a lot of trouble, a real challenge to even begin to think of what a real policy would look like to accommodate people in a way that is humane, in a way that is efficient, at a time when resources throughout society are conspicuously lacking.
Well, that's not an excuse. That's just a reason to do better quicker.
Well,
it doesn't go, oh, no, it's a tricky job.
No, well,
all right, oh, well, never mind.
Well, we could say that we try to stop. We try to stop the problem at its source. And it seems to me that until we basically say that we have a much more greater clarity about enforcing border controls and take our borders more seriously, until we do that, the problem will get greater and greater and greater.
Yeah, and I'm going to see, we half discussed this the other day on one of my outside broadcasts. What I mean by that is when we was out and about in one of our venues with an audience, and it got quite heated, the question I'm about to ask now. But what do you think about the role that the RNLI are playing in this? Do you think this is a help or a hindrance in terms of the situation we find ourselves in now?
Well, specifically, the RNLI is there to save lives at sea.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's what they do.
Yeah, but the point I'm making is that these people know there is this whole system that's been set up now that they know that actually they can get on these boats. The likelihood is, if there's ever any problem, they're pretty much certainly going to get rescued. They're pretty much certainly going to make it to the UK. So the question that we got into in one of our debates a couple of days ago is whether or not the RNLI are doing the right thing or not.
Well, what's the alternative? You let them drown?
Well, no. What the alternative is that basically you send out a message that the RNLI is not a taxi service into Kent. Now, I live in Kent, and what concerns me, amongst other things, is that there are people living in Dover, who really are petrified because people arrive in the middle of the night, and this is not just simply a kind of moral panic that's been invented, knock on their door and ask to use their telephone, and people, actually genuinely fear, and they actually perceive this situation as if it's an invasion. Now, usually when people are threatened with an invasion, and I know that can be a very explosive concept, they usually create a kind of sense of security. They create institutions that will protect them from that. The way the RNLI works, with the best of intentions, is to undermine that sense of existential security for people. So it seems to me that we've got to have a grown-up discussion about, so what's more important, stopping immigration in this kind of way, or alternatively, sort of continuing and providing a taxi service for people?
I don't think there's much existential security in being someone who goes in a boat on the waters of around Britain, and someone in a lifeboat. It's in the name. It's written in the name. It's a lifeboat. It saves lives. Going, oh, where are you from? You don't look like you're from round here. Maybe we'll let you drown. I mean, like, literally, how are we implementing it? It's nonsense.
That's not the alternative.
Once again, we're talking about tents in London parks, and we're talking about letting people drown in the English Channel. The metaphorical ship has already sailed. You've already got a problem at that point.
So
they shouldn't be in small boats in the Channel because it should have been dealt with already.
So you're saying that people can be blackmailed.
People treated with fairly and their lives preserved.
Blackmail society because saying that unless you do what we tell you, people are going to get drowned. Because that's what we're talking about, kind of moral blackmail. But essentially what we're saying is that you, people living in Kent, have got to put up with this and live in an insecure existence, because the alternative to that is that people will die.
No, why don't we say to the Home Office and to the Home Secretary, you have a job to defend our borders, to provide asylum to genuine asylum seekers, and to make sure that people who are volunteers, they stop their everyday lives in order to go and rescue people at sea, are not put in a position where they cannot win, because they are literally aware that every call-out, they might watch 30 people drown at sea.
Yeah.
But everyone...
That is just intolerable.
Every single person has the same objective, I think, which is that this needs to stop. There's a variety of reasons why it needs to stop, whether it's people's safety, whether it's expenses at this end, whatever it is everyone's got the same objective, that this needs to stop. But there are a variety of links in this chain when you start right at the beginning, and it's such a slick operation now. You go on TikTok, there's traffickers that are almost using it as a travel brochure. They're using TikTok as a way of recruiting customers. It's going to sound really crass, but this is what they're doing. It's a huge industry now. And they know they've got it all timed out to all the component parts, right? All I've got to do is, you're not going to cross the channel. I'm not sending you across the channel. I'm literally sending you into English waters. And the second you get into English waters, you will be collected. This is like a whole chain now that's operating in this slick thing. So you have to be looking at each element of this chain, going, right, how do we try and de-incentivize, break each link of this chain to stop people getting on these boats in the first place? Because to me, the whole thing is broken at every single component part of that chain.
But I think you need to get France, first of all, to take its borders more seriously. At the moment, France is an accomplice, along with, as it happens, the Home Office, because they are, they know exactly what the game is. The game is to pretend to be stopping immigrants, but at the same time, They know that's not going to happen unless there's greater resolution to the
£80 million, by the way, we've spent that we've given to French over the last 2 years.
Hang on, wait, I've got to pick you up. I mean, if you want to call it a game, fine, but it's not about stopping immigrants. It's about protecting borders.
But that's what
because stopping
that's not what they're doing.
immigrants is some kind of catch-all term that feeds into racist ideologies that aren't helpful in this space.
It does, but it seems to me that borders are borders. So either we control the borders, or they become a meaningless metaphor that's completely diffused.
So, sure, control the border, but that isn't about stopping immigrants.
No, if you control
the border... What's it about then? Controlling a border? What do you think controlling a border is?
Well, what about the immigrants you want?
Yeah.
What about the asylum seekers who have a right to come?
But hang on, because if you're controlling your border, then you have the systems. So you have, whether it's passport control, visa systems. So that is part of controlling your border. So surely stopping illegal immigration is part of that.
Yes, but that's not what Frank said.
No, what Frank said exactly is that when you control your border, then you get to decide who comes in and who doesn't.
Yeah.
And I think that we have a responsibility to enforce that. Because if there are no borders, then it's got major consequences for the communities that are in the immediate area, but also for society as a whole. And I think that there is no real honesty on this issue at the moment, because people in the know are too scared to take the measures that are necessary to impose a proper working form of border controls. Instead, what they kind of opt for is a compromise, which pretends to be doing something here and there, but we know that every year the situation gets worse and worse, and every year the promises that are made to the people of this country are never kept. I mean, if you go back the last 50 years, not once have those promises ever been kept. So after a while, you've got to say, we either just open up our borders in a most promiscuous way, or we decide that time has come for something a little bit more decisive than is the case at the moment.
But I would be even starting at part one of this chain, this whole TikTok thing. You know, the police must be able to get to the details of these people that are posting these travel adverts, I would call them, on TikTok. Why aren't those people in prison?
It's a good question.
What are you doing about those TikTok advertisers?
All these roads lead to the Home Office, to a catastrophically terrible Home Secretary and in terribly funded, terribly organised
But no one else, Marianne's got the answer. I mean, I've asked Labour people these last few days, well, what's your answer then? They say, oh, yeah, better coordination with the French. Like, what?
Well, yes, as well, because it's a shared border, and so you can't just do it at Dover. You have to do it at the other side as well.
Obviously,
you have to target all those places.
Not
but
going to happen.
That has to be driven as the most important agenda by the Home Office. We shouldn't be shouting at migrants, we should be shouting at the Home Secretary.
Well, Michelle, the one thing I want to say
Well, I'll tell you, being shouted at, I'm getting shouted at now in my ear about the break I was supposed to have gone to it 2 minutes ago. Make it very quick.
Even if TikTok did not exist, people want to come here, and I can understand why they want to come here. And that pressure to come here will continue no matter what happens on social media, because people have bad lives in many, many parts of the world, and they look to England and Britain, and they say, this is where I want to bring up my kids. And that's the dynamic that's at play here. Understandable dynamic. And we have a...
Frank, that was not a short version.
Sorry.
Right, you can tell me his longer version in the break. I do have to go to my break now. When I come back, I want to talk to you about facial recognition technology. Where do you stand on that? Do you think it's a useful tool to help catch criminals? Or, quite frankly, do you see it as a breach of your privacy? Tell me, and I'll see you in 2 minutes.
Weekday afternoons on GB News, we've got the whole of the UK covered. From 12 to 3, it's GB News Day with me, Mark Longhurst.
And me, Gloria Di Piero. You'll get the very latest on everything that's been going on across our great nation.
And from 3 till 6, watch out for GB News Live with me, Patrick Christys. I'm not here to mess around. With all the biggest topics and guests, you will always be up to date. GB News Day and GB News Live from 12 p.m.
Only on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
My name's Tom Harwood, and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GB News.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
On Mark Dolan tonight, we have a simple plan, which is to inform, stimulate and entertain in equal measure. It's all about getting your opinions on the national television airwaves. I love my viewer emails, mark@gbnews.uk. So do join me from 9 p.m. to midnight every Friday, Saturday and Sunday for big guests, big opinions and a big presenter. 6'5", don't you know? See you then on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
Join me, Arlene Foster, for The Briefing on GB News. Every Friday at 3 p.m, I'll give you all the latest political news and analysis, and we'll have robust live debate. To make sure that you're caught up on all of the biggest issues of the day, we'll bring on experts in their field. I'll ask the questions that you'd like to ask. We're not afraid to tackle discussions from all perspectives, including yours. Don't forget, The Briefing with me, Arlene Foster, every Friday at 3 p.m. on GB News.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company right through until 7 o'clock this evening, keeping me company here in the studio on my panel. We've got the anthropologist and filmmaker, Mariana Hotta, and the author and academic, Frank Furedi. We've just been discussing the situation with the people crossing the channel and what the answer is to that. Bob says, Michelle, how come we could build the emergency COVID hospitals so quickly, but we can't seem to do anything here so quickly? You're saying, why can't we do it all again, but this time for this problem, make them nice, secure, and fast-track applications? There you go. Anne says, we need to stop this, putting migrants up in hotels. We could put them on one big ship, she says. You need a big ship, and I think we're at 38,000 now. I think that is the number so far.
No, 118,000.
What, this year?
Backlog, case backlog.
Oh, right, yeah, but crossing's got 38,000 crossings this year. So, I mean, like I say, a huge ship. What's the plural of ships? Is there one? No? I don't know. Yeah, ships plural. I don't know. Sometimes when you have multiple things, you have a fancy name, don't you? But no, you need a lot of ships, and I don't think there's enough ships in the land for that, quite frankly. Bernard says, your tenant thing, why don't you put it in the ground of army camps across the country? Not a bad idea. Dave says, I thought people had tent camps in France. Perhaps we're making it too good here, and that's why they're coming. Dwayne says, these people should be made to feel as uncomfortable as possible to encourage them to go back to France or beyond. I suspect you might disagree with that, making them uncomfortable. Tony says, what about Buckingham Palace? They have apparently 750 rooms. Why don't we make some of those available? I've got to say, Tony, I haven't been funny or anything, but at the rate we're going, you know, I laugh, but we're on 4-star hotels already. Soon, I suspect, you'll be nudging your way up to 5 stars. So never rule it out at Buckingham Palace. What? I don't know. Let's reassess where we are in about a year's time. Serco, perhaps, might be interested to check the availability of those rooms. You never know, stranger things have happened. Right, so let's move on, shall we? Talk about facial recognition, live facial recognition. Where do you stand on this? British police have been experimenting with this technology, believing that it can potentially help combat crime and terrorism, but a new study suggests that they should be banned from using it in all public spaces because essentially they're breaking ethical standards and human rights laws. I've got to say, I couldn't care less if you want to scan my face as I wander around my daily business. I've never done anything wrong, so no, so what? What have I got to worry about, Frank?
Well, I think as a citizen in a democratic society, we assume that you should not be put under surveillance, and that in a sense it's very, very important that your private life is maintained, the maintenance of privacy, and allowing you to be yourself in your own way without being subjected to surveillance, I think is essential for a healthy democratic world.
But we've already got surveillance, got CCTV everywhere.
Exactly, and that troubles me. I think I'm very much troubled by the fact that we are continually being watched, and I do worry that if we kind of accept the argument that this technology keeps us safe and keeps us secure and it helps to fight crime, if you basically accept that, then what we are saying is that a kind of politicized big brother technological sort of institution will become more and more powerful and gradually will end up going in the way that China has, where essentially you cannot brush your teeth in the morning without somebody watching you and giving you advice as to what kind of toothpaste to use.
But you say it troubles you, but if you were wandering down some quiet street and you got set about by some guys and the police were alerted because they picked up on it on this central monitoring system and then they sent help to you and they saved your life, it wouldn't trouble you then, would it? You'd be grateful for it.
Possibly I would, but the argument that you have to trade off your freedoms for security has been used for the last 400 years as a prelude to bringing in repressive laws, as a prelude to bringing in more surveillance. And I think that ethos, that somehow our safety depends upon being watched, is something that I find very troubling.
Do you find it troubling?
I kind of see where you're both coming from, to be honest. I think fundamentally it's an incredibly powerful technology. The genie's out the bottle. And so what we need now is the kind of the right tension. You know, you've got a very powerful dog. You need a really powerful, strong lead to hold it in check so that it doesn't, you know, go on the rampage and do harm. Fundamentally, what this survey, this study, which was done by academics at the University of Cambridge, and they were assessing the way that the Met Police and South Wales Police had used this facial recognition software, this kind of approach. They said that it didn't meet minimum standards for ethical and legal, so the actual law that is there now, partly because there's no clear national framework, so police officers are having to sort of work out what is or isn't okay. That fundamentally some of this is black box technology, so you kind of like plug in data at one end and you get results out at the other end, but there's no oversight of what's happening in the middle. And so you get things like really dodgy racial profiling. So, you know, your example of Frank walking down the dark street at night, that maybe a police officer will be deployed simply because a black man is walking down the street as well. Oh, better go and rescue him.
Don't be utterly ridiculous.
No, because that is the way.
No one, let's be sensible. No one's going to look at CCTV and go, there's Frank walking down the street. Whoa, there's a black person. Out you go. That's just silly.
No, but
the technology has, well, because if the technology, for example, can't discern different people's faces from certain minority groups, then it may well flag up. This might be that known suspect who's wanted under, who's under warrant or what have you, and then it does deploy, and it's someone who's just walking their dog or going to pick up their kid from childcare. And that's where we need proper oversight, and where you need to have, you know, the strong checks and balances and the controls, so that you do get the benefits, but you also are protected as a citizen in a democracy.
But why do you assume that we can have a proper oversight, given the experience in all the different jurisdictions in America, in Canada, Australia? The experience is that there's a lot of discussions about ethical standards. But to be really honest, ethics and surveillance don't mix together. And the very idea that there can be an ethical standard which you can apply to what is essentially spying on individuals, I think is weird. There is no way in which any kind of moral moral imagination can be focused on this kind of an issue. And we're being very, very dishonest here, because we assume that if there was the right kind of policy in place, then various violations of individuals' freedom would not occur. It will occur because it's inherent in the system. It's not something that's exogenous to it. It is integral to the very surveillance sort of culture that is being promoted here.
But what are you saying? So you're talking about surveillance culture. So are you saying you'd prefer to live in a country with no CCTV, no facial recognition?
Well, I prefer that we fight crime by investigating criminals, rather than creating a situation where you have what's called pre-crime, where you assume that certain individuals are more likely to be...
Yeah, but do you know the lunacy of the world we live in now? We talk about I'd rather fight crime using, detective work or whatever. I saw a case the other day, might have even been today, actually. All my days roll into one. But I saw this case where some guy in a wig had basically exposed himself to these two kids. Yeah. The police have sent this kind of wanted description out. They're not even saying we're seeking this guy. They're saying we're looking for an individual, a person. And people are saying this is a guy. Why aren't you saying you're seeking a guy? And we've reached the point where the police are so politically correct that they won't even describe who someone is because, in case they offend someone or whatever. It's so ludicrous that actually, if you're going to be so ridiculous, you do need technology like this, Frank.
Well, I don't think the technology will solve the problem that the police find it difficult to know what a woman is, or make a distinction between men and women. The police use very strong, very euphemistic language to avoid telling the public as to where the real threat emanates from. And therefore, I'm not really surprised that when you see this guy, sort of masturbating in front of two children, and it's caught on camera, they are reluctant to actually tell it like it is. And I'm much more worried about the police that is inherently dishonest than the fact that technology might not be available to kind of show this kind of display.
And when you say about mistaken identity as well, because I get your point, by the way, if you're going to try and scan faces and attach them to things, you're going to have opportunities where it goes wrong, or situations where it goes wrong. But surely you'd be more comfortable with cases of mistaken identity if it then leads to higher prosecution rates of actual criminals, wouldn't you?
No, not if it's systemic and we just go, oh, well, that comes with the territory. Hard luck, young black man. You're going to get stopped and searched, for example. I mean, that's bias and error in humans. It's not an AI system that's churning out these, we should probably stop them and pat them down because they look like they're up to no good. So I think fundamentally, I agree with you, Michelle. I think they're tools. It's how you use the tool. It's how you protect people from the tool.
Well, there you go. What do you make of all of this? Quite frankly, I couldn't care less if you want to watch me get quite bored of it, following me around. You'd soon switch off and go find someone else. But where do you sit on all of this? Do you think it is an infringement of your privacy? Or do you just think, actually, so what, you can watch me if it helps you catch criminals? Are you concerned about the mistaken identity part of it? Tell me. I'm going to take a quick break. When I come back, I'll have some of your thoughts. But also, I want to talk about whether or not you would ever be inclined to meet someone who'd murdered your child, or never even mind murdering your child, even just committed an act of crime against you or your loved ones. What do you think to kind of restorative justice? Is it a good thing or not? Tell me and I'll see you in 2.
Hello there, it's Eamon Holmes here from Breakfast on GB News. We're not just on your television and your screens, We're
on DAB plus digital radio, so you can listen to your favourite shows on the move.
If you've not yet listened to GB News Radio, it's very simple. We're on your radio player and TuneIn apps, on your smart speaker, phone or tablet, or online at gbnews.uk.
Take us with you wherever you go. GB News Radio.
You never have to miss a moment of the People's Channel.
Hello, I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m, where I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians as we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight. If it's a big story, we'll be covering it, I guarantee, but we'll also have some fun along the way. That's GB News Headliners at 11 p.m. We won't put you to sleep, unlike some of the other pay-per-review shows out there. So join us, 11 p.m, 7 nights a week.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Join me, Nana Akua, on Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today.
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Friday, Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News.
Every morning from 6 o'clock, we'll wake you up with GB News Breakfast with all the stories you didn't know from the night before.
So whether it's serious news, entertainment, or your own views from all over our great nation, we're here to kick off your day with a smile.
The national media should be reflecting and reporting what's happening here.
You will notice the northwestern accents.
Whether you're with us on TV, radio, or online, every morning, it's breakfast from 6 a.m. Hope you can join us.
Every Saturday at 2 o'clock, join me, Darren Grimes, for Real Britain. I'm not afraid to give you a platform and say it how it is.
Come on, make the case. Something like this is very, very important to people.
And we're always up for a laugh on this show.
God, honestly, you'd think there were no problems in the world.
Real Britain, every Saturday on GB News.
On the Mark Steyn Show, we cover the stories a lot of people are scared even to mention. The stuff that really matters with some of the world's biggest thinkers.
Now is his opportunity to kind of take the steering wheel of history.
Break away from the flop at 8 o'clock on GB News with the Mark Steyn Show.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation.
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV.
On radio.
And online.
We're proud to be the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hello there, welcome back to Dewbs & Co with me, Michelle Dewberry, keeping you company until 7 o'clock tonight. And here in the studio with me, we've got the anthropologist and filmmaker Mariana Hotta and the author and academic Frank Ferretti. So welcome back, everybody. Lots of you responding to that topic we've just been discussing, all about facial recognition, whether or not it's an invasion of your privacy or a good tool to fight crime. Lots of you are getting in touch. Mel says, I don't care about it. I'm not a criminal. So if it clears our streets of dangerous criminals, then yes, go ahead. Steve says, I've seen this 2 years ago in China where people were paying for their goods using phones with facial recognition. This is mass control and surveillance and should not be used, he says. Jay says, I wasn't bothered at all about facial recognition before COVID, but now the idea is a total no-go for me. Steve says, I have all my freedoms when I'm out and about, whether that's with or without cameras. And Val says, I don't understand what's troubling about facial recognition. I don't find it a problem. You say you'd also be happy to carry an ID card because you've got nothing to hide. I guess the point to think about there, everyone, is what about when it goes wrong? The point Marianne was making earlier on about actually, what about mistaken identity? Would you appreciate it if every 5 minutes you kept getting stopped by the police because your camera had clicked up your name and your face somewhere? Would you be happy with that? Would you just see it as a small price to pay to make the streets safer or not? Let me know your thoughts, but I'm going to move on for now because 3 years ago, actually now, gosh, time flies, in my hometown of Hull, a 21-year-old girl, Libby Squire, was raped and killed. Now, earlier on today, her mum was on this channel actually explaining that she's going to go meet the daughter's killer, Libby's killer. She wants to meet him face to face, not necessarily to forgive and move on, but more to understand the circumstances around how her daughter died. And it sparked quite a conversation, Marianne, about, Libby's mum was saying she doesn't hate this person. She doesn't want to go down that route. But a lot of people are kind of talking about restorative justice, whether or not it's something that works. Where do you stand on it?
Well, as I understand it, and my heart goes out to the Squire family,
Yep,
it must be an incredibly difficult thing to even think about whether you want to do that. But the mum, Lisa, said that her mind goes to dark places when she doesn't, it's filling in the blanks of what happened to her daughter. And actually, if she can sit down with the man who did it and find out what happened to her daughter, then it will give her some peace from those dark moments. So it's not about forgiving. It's not about wanting to hear that he's sorry for what he did or anything like that. It's about what's in it for her, if you know what I mean.
I do.
And I think that's where the restorative justice element comes in, that victims and victims' families have a right to sort of have that conversation, to get answers, to kind of confront that person and say, this is what you did, or tell me about that.
Yeah, I mean, if your mind goes to dark places not knowing, I mean, can you imagine? Because it's not going to be pleasant, the information that you find out, I suspect, is it?
No, but I guess it's, I don't know, maybe better the devil you know than all the demons that you can conjure.
Yeah.
The bad news is that there are no answers. So if a lot of people have this idea that there's a lesson to be learned from each instance of a crime, and only if you knew what it was that drove a person to do a horrible thing, then society would learn from that. And I think, unfortunately, so my understanding of the way criminology works, despite all the kind of claims that we know in advance who's likely to be a criminal and what they're going to do, in reality, these tragedies are very context-specific. They occur in a very specific circumstance. And I'm not a fan of restorative justice. I think it basically dissolves the idea of responsibility from being taken very, very seriously. It claims to take responsibility seriously, but the unfortunate thing is that it assumes that justice can be enhanced by listening to what a criminal says about the circumstance of their crime. And I think what it does is it kind of erodes the line between punishing people who deserve to be punished, and somehow imagining that that punishment could lead to some kind of positive consequences for the victims of that crime. Now, I've got nothing against this lady seeing that individual.
No, of course, and it's all personal choice, isn't it?
Absolutely. But, and I shouldn't say this, but especially as an academic, I find it very difficult to forgive. And I find it very difficult to imagine that if somebody hurts me or my family or my children, that I'd want to have a sit down and have a cup of coffee with that person.
Wow, but I don't think that's what she's doing.
No, and I do want to quote her here. She actually says, I don't wish to forgive him. I don't wish to understand why he did what he did. For me, it's very much about finding out how Libby was in those last 20 minutes of her life. So that's her perspective. But your perspective, I'm not talking about this case anymore, I'm talking about the broader concept. You just said, I probably shouldn't say this, but I found it difficult to forgive. What's wrong with that? A lot of people would probably feel that way too.
Well, in the academic setting, forgiveness is seen as this thing that you automatically project onto situations.
Is it?
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that if you're not able to forgive, then there is no possibility of rehabilitation. I mean, that's the basic argument, that if you cannot forgive somebody for their crime, then somehow how can we expect them to become a better person later on?
But some people don't deserve to be given these second chances.
I agree.
Wait, but, no, those are two separate things. Someone can be rehabilitated.
Yeah.
They can still bring positive to the life, despite whatever bad thing they did.
Absolutely.
But that isn't incumbent on the victim forgiving them.
No, but
those two are two separate things.
I agree, but somehow, often people make this connection that somehow people who promote restorative justice argues that by bringing together the victim with the criminal, you basically create a relationship that can basically both help the victim by understanding what has happened, and at the same time, sort of make the criminal understand the horror of what they have done, which will then accelerate their rehabilitation.
Oh, I absolutely buy into that.
I don't. I think that's a fantasy that it's got no basis in reality. I think people can be rehabilitated, but they get rehabilitated. Some
people can be rehabilitated, but some people are just wrong-uns and beyond. Or I'm sorry, I'm just being blunt, but they are, quite frankly. I'm thinking of those two people that killed Jamie Bulger. One of them seems to have been in and out of prison like a yo-yo. Some people, unfortunately, and people will get upset and say, oh, she can't say that. But it is, if you ask me, there are just some people that are too far gone. They're just too far gone.
Well, the point is that I always think back of those poor people that got killed by that Islamic terrorist at London Bridge. and who basically were really into this idea of restorative justice. So they get this terrorist to come and have a cup of tea with them in this seminar because they really believe that by doing the right thing, things will get sorted.
Well, yeah, and do you remember, by the way, because I've got to, I'm going to switch to Patrick in a sec. I remember those people in that, was it Fishhooks Hall or whatever it was, remember that?
Yeah.
And they were there, exactly the point that you're making. They went on to kill the people that were trying to help them. Make of that what you will. Patrick Christie is up next with Friday Night Feast. Patrick, what have you got coming up?
Oh, I've got absolutely loads. We're going to dissect Prince Harry's new book, see what we can find out about that. Is he just a ginger whinger? We're also going to be talking about what's been going on. Migrant tent cities coming to a park near you. We'll find out. We've got all our usual features. Challenge Christie's. I went out canvassing for the Monster Raving Loony Party to see if I could get some votes. GB News sent me to the wrong location, so I ended up interviewing people at Comic-Con dressed up as cartoon characters, what they thought about serious news events. And, of course, it's Dog of the Week. Oh, and the story we've all been waiting for. I bring you the latest on the case of the Somerset Gimp.
Sounds good. I shall be tuning in for that. Cynthia says, Michelle, forgiveness is power. If you forgive, it sets you free. But holding on...
Hello there, I'm Stephen Keats with your latest Met Office forecast. And for the weekend coming up, it looks like it's going to be quite a changeable affair with some further rain at times, often quite breezy, but not a washout by any means. There will be some sunshine to be had and it will remain very mild. And that's because we have the wind coming up from the south or southwest around this area of low pressure that's been anchored out in the Atlantic. But there will be fronts coming up in that flow from time to time, hence the changeable theme. So Friday's rain will be slowly clearing away from the far north of Scotland, only to be replaced, though, by the next batch of rain coming up from the south into southern England, eventually parts of Wales and Midlands, East Anglia by the end of the night. Quite misty and murky tied in with this. The odd fog patch further north, but it is a mostly dry night to come for a good part of Scotland and Northern Ireland. Here, a touch on the chilly side in one or two spots, but on the whole it's a mild start, and it's here where we'll have the best of the sunshine through Saturday morning, although the cloud will be invading from the south. That said, I think the far north of Scotland should remain mostly dry, and where we start off cloudy and damp across a good part of England and Wales, well, I think for many the conditions will improve with some warm sunshine coming through for parts of southeast England, highs of perhaps 22 Celsius in the London area, really exceptional for this time of year. A hangback of cloud could keep parts of Wales, southwest England, a bit on the damp side, but even here it won't be raining all day. And then through Saturday evening, the bulk of the rain pushes its way further north into parts of Scotland. A weak cold front brings splashes of rain across eastern England, perhaps peppering up again towards the southeast late in the night, and a few showers coming back into the far west, but elsewhere some clear spells, and again, it's a very mild night. Temperatures, for most places, staying in double figures. So it could be a damp start then to Sunday across parts of the southeast and East Anglia. A bit of uncertainty, I think, as to how far west this area of rain comes, but probably staying, generally speaking, to the east of the meridian. Elsewhere, it's a picture of sunshine and showers. The showers coming in from the west in bands, and some of these will be quite heavy with the risk of hail and thunder at times. And it sets the scene for a changeable spell of weather into next week. And whilst it's very mild at first, just cooling down a touch. Take care.
We are GB News.
And we'd like to say thank you
To each and every one of you.
for helping our great nation
Find its voice.
We're absolutely everywhere.
across England, Scotland,
Wales and Northern Ireland.
On TV,
On radio and online.
We're proud to be
The People's Channel.
Britain's
News channel.
hello, I'm Michelle.